I think if we're talking about language, we need to consider the way that so many family names in this part of the world are linked back to Scotland and the Ulster Scots, and that identity is still so strong, and the way they talk is unique. And for a young fellow like myself from East Belfast arriving here, for a long time I needed a translator. It was difficult to pick up the speed they talk, the different words they use. It's a beautiful introduction to the Ulster Scots if you step into the bar in Dervock and just sit back and listen.
I was well aware that there was links to Scotland because of our language. The words that we were using back then, same as we are now, I knew then that there was a link with Scotland and here. But it was in later life I discovered that link was even stronger than I actually thought it was. I grew up believing in the plantation. The plantation was the people coming over to this country and populating it in 1602. But in later years, it had become more historically aware of where I was living at. And I discovered that the earliest people in this island moved and populated Scotland. So it was like the plantation was like a homecoming. I discovered in later years, the plantation was like a homecoming. It was the people the descendants of the people who had left here. This was them coming back to their homeland.
The way I speak, colloquialisms all piled into in, it becomes a language. There's always an ongoing argument, is it a language? Is it this? Is it that? The European Bureau of Lesser Used Languages say it is, and there has to be a lot of academics sitting and pouring it all around there. So I'll go with them. I think it is. But the great Reverend W.F. Marshall said we had 3 marks. With the mark of the rose, the Old English. With the mark of the thistle, the Old Lowland Scots. And with the mark of the shamrock, which is Irish. Scottish Gaelic, Irish Gaelic. I don't know how much the difference is actually in them.
Understanding the whole Ulster Scots language was a big culture clash for me. Like words, there was a lot of words you didn't understand. There was a lot of, for being only 30 miles down the road, it was completely chalk and cheese. Words like scullery or gand in the tin, I hadn't a clue what anybody was saying. Like it was just like a whole different language coming from Tyrone to County Antrim.
Whenever I first got it really rammed into me with secondary school, I didn't actually expect everybody to talk like me. But it's a bit of a shock to the system when it's so different and you're saying words and you're getting laughed at and you're thinking, why are you laughing at me? Half the country knows what that means, and yet now you want to pillory me because I use that word. It was hurtful, I suppose, but they didn't realise they were derogating words which were a big chunk of their history.
I remember the first account duck I got about language was Charlie King down there in Roland Hill. We had passed the exam and we're on the tech school in Ballymammy. And I can remember they were coming along the road and you had to announce who you were and where you were from. There was a certain teacher whenever you come along and he heard who, oh no, another one. No, another one. We talked just ordinary the way we talked at him.
I noticed the difference was when we went to secondary school. Our language was battered out. You weren't allowed to speak like that. You know, you had to try and speak in their language. And to me that was strange, you know, because the words and the phrases that I was used to saying, they made us believe that we were inferior, that we were backward in our way of thinking because of our language. And now they're promoting the language. It's all out there in the open now and it's a recognised language.
That was one of the biggest bugbears ever I had. Nobody ever tell you were allowed to be bilingual. They had to drive this Lowland Scots monster out of you. If they just said, look, we need you speaking English. You must speak English today, but we need today. The minute you pull out the rest of you, go back to being yourself, be bilingual in effect. Nobody went to the bother explaining that was quite acceptable to do that. And I think that was a mistake. If we'd have said, right, there's a room full of country and what way you got to approach them? Oh, it can't be talking English. That stuff they got is no good. That's not really so. English in, whatever your own tongue is, out.
It was someone you were made feel guilty of. And as masters went into the service industries where you had to talk to other folk, if you talked as broad as we talked, you didn't get a job. You didn't get selling in. You had to be polite to talk to people and say, oh, yes, I know what you mean. That's the sort of, yes, I know, James. Yes, of course. And that's the way you had to talk to get a job. And back the whole language has disappeared. But with Charlie Gillen and when other folk in the village here, with Frank and us, we worked very hard at trying to get all them old words back. Tell a muddling Plutus or a snaffle batting a horse. There's words that stretch for long enough. And what we are trying to do is get all that stuff together while it's still there.
My impression would be that Dervock people were always proud of Ulster Scots and the language, and that's why they're so enthusiastic about speaking it and promoting it and writing poetry in it and sharing it with other people.
My main vehicle for keeping it alive is rhymes, poems, call them what you will. The great Robert Service said he was never a poet, simply a rhymer. Maybe I fit in there somewhere. Not that I'm imagining myself being on the calibre of Service, but if you put that in a rhyme and somebody gets the rhythm of that and they get the wee story throughout, then they're going to hear we look at it and think, that old boy's maybe not so far off the mark at all, because I like that there. And that's the vehicle I used up to now to get through to perhaps more folk.
I'm born and bred in Dervock. My father actually was born here as well. I love Dervock. It's probably the best place that you would want to grow up in. When I grew up in Dervock in the 70s, it was a small village. There was only maybe 4 estates in Dervock, so you got to know everybody. And you would walk down the street and you would know everybody.
Although I haven't been involved in the band in Dervock, because obviously it's not the end of music that I'm involved in. But yes, there's always been Dervock Band, always on the go from what I remember. They were always involved in all the community things that happened, the community week. And the band's always out there coming up to the 12th of July. Really remember that as a child because we couldn't wait up to get down to the bonfire on the 11th night. And that was a big thing. And the band was always out as well on the 11th night and paraded the village. So yeah, the band was always a big part of Dervock.
Well, growing up in Dervock in the 70s, and Mummy didn't drive, and Daddy had died when he was quite young. Mummy, the only way that I could get anywhere is, like most young people at that time, was join a band. I learned a two-row accordion, and I went to all the band parades, loved it. And then I just progressed. And I remember I went into other bands. I used to help out another band, and then that sort of led on to helping out another band. So I was all over the country with marching bands side of things. And then I remember going to a concert and listening to Kelly Coogan Accordion Orchestra at this concert, and I thought, I want to be in that band. I eventually went to Cullybackey for accordion lessons, and within a short period of time, I was signed up to join the orchestra. I spent, I think, 11 years in Kelly Coogan. It was a very tough orchestra to be in because the standard of music in Kelly Coogan was art level, so it was extremely high, and it was a very steep learning curve.
Dervock being in Kingdom of Dalriada and being close to Scotland, a lot of our tunes are Scottish. Things like Killiecranky, so it brings that whole Ulster Scots element to our band. Like, and there's nowhere in the area it's more Ulster Scots than Dervock. Being in the bands gives you a real sense of belonging. We've got from 4-year-old to 68. We've got the old people teaching the young people the way musical instruments and the way things can be. The band's involved in cleanups in the village. It's involved in fun days. It's involved in several parades throughout the year. It's involved with a bonfire. Like, the band has a vital role in this community. And anybody that's in our band has a real sense of well-being. They're part of our family and we all look after each other.
I mean, as a kid, that's what we looked forward to, getting out. And yeah, everybody was out to see the band. Everybody was out to, go down to the bonfire. And everybody, basically came out on those events to get together.
It's something that could easily have been forgot about. It's now been rejuvenated and it's been brought to the forefront where kids are now going to be able to teach their kids that it's part of our culture, it's part of our heritage, it's vitally important to who we are. I think the community look to the band for leadership for a lot of things, and it's the band's sort of direction when it comes to loyalism, history, cultural. I think it's everybody looks at the band, what's the band doing, and that sort of thing. I think that's a vital role within the village.
We've had a local band, Dervock Flute Band, here since the 70s, which is extremely good to hear that they are still parading and they still have a good band. It's always good to hear them because, that's part of our culture. And it's good for me to hear that, there's still people wanting to play music. But Dervock is rich in musicians. When I was growing up, we had singers, we had guitarists, we have bagpipe players. The quality of musicianship in Dervock has always been very, very good.
We've had a couple of sessions now in the local primary school where a gentleman, a facilitator, has been in learning the kids about the whole Ulster Scots, about their own identity, about music, about the lambeg and fife, where that derived from and how it played a particular role within the marching bands. How the lambeg is actually called, for some people it's called the lodge drum, because it used to be before the new flute bands and accordion bands. Like, traditionally it was the lambegs and fife that led the lower orders out to their annual 12th of July. Well, the next generation that's coming up needs to know the origins of certain words that some of their parents, grandparents spoke, Like, they might be lost, so they need to be retained so they can ask questions. Where words like Shuch, Abena, Fernance, and all that, where they derive from. Those need to be identified and recorded because some of those old words are got to be lost for the next generation that's coming up. And then the whole musical aspect of it, that needs to be sort of recorded so the next generation will appreciate their own culture and heritage.
The idea that now there's facilities and there's people who are keen to record that stuff, I think that sort of history, it's been around for a while, but it's easier go at. I can get at it. That sounds a bit like a mafia, but I know people who can make that possible. And if you say that word, not only writing it down, okay, that's fine, but how do you approach that written thing? If you hear it spoken, then you know who to say it next time round. That wee films, perhaps keep it light, give folk a bit of a laugh, or make them think of who belonged to them was killed in the war. If you can bring it into them two things, either a wee giggle or a very sombre minute, that tends to stick in folks' mind.
Well, there has been a change in the culture. The Ulster Scots language has now been spoke freely, and they can understand it. And if you go to Belfast, they'd love to hear you speaking, to hear your language, So it's different from what it was, a lot different.
I think in many aspects, when it comes to language, we see our young people mimicking television, shall we say, and talking like people on TV. I don't see that so often in Dervock. I think the Dervock children talk just like their parents and their grandparents, and that's fantastic because that means that way of talking will endure.